For this quick figure sketch, I'm using a 4B pencil. I like a nice, long, sharp point. That way you can use the side of the pencil for shading and the tip if you want sort of finer, darker lines. So I'm using a rough, slightly textured paper. I've picked a picture that I can draw life-size. When you're learning, it's much better to draw life-size, and that way the measuring is easier. So I use my pencil as my measuring guide, and I can transfer measurements from the picture onto the paper. One of the first things I do is put some reference marks on it. So about halfway up the picture, the bottom of the picture, and the top of the picture. And that way I've got something to measure from. These marks are quite important to get these right because these will guide everything else you do. So top, middle, and bottom. And then I'll also mark a center line on my picture and also on my page. Okay, so these are lines to measure from so that you can get the proportions of your drawing correct. So there's my center line. So where do you start? Well, it's actually quite a good idea to start with the head, because if you draw the body and then you can't sort of kind of position the head in the right place, it'll look a bit strange. But if you start with the head, get the head the right size. So I've measured off my drawing. I'm measuring now on my paper, and that's the height of the head from the chin to the top of the hair. So I can start sort of putting in the shape of the head. Notice the lines are very, very loose at this stage, almost invisible. And as you draw, you will make mistakes, and so you'll need to correct them. And if your lines are too heavy, you'll just have a mass of lines. So really, really faint lines. Next thing I do is find something in the middle of the picture, probably the elbow or the arm, slightly below the center line, and then I can measure the length of the arm and put the arm in. I don't draw the actual hand, just a sort of a shape to indicate the hand. So there's the right arm, the knee, the position of the knee, and I'm positioning that using my center line as my reference. It's slightly to the right of the center line and slightly above the middle line. Okay, so I'm measuring off, just checking measurements from the center line to various parts. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is the shoulder. So I've measured the distance between my center line and the shoulder. And I can now kind of put in the shoulder. So it's all about getting things in the right place. Okay, and then I can draw in the neckline. Because I've got my head and my shoulder, I can now put in that neckline. Next thing I can do is put the rest of the right arm in, get the angle right. Sometimes I line my pencil along a line just to help me to get the angle right and get my measurements right. Next thing, the seat. How far is that from the midpoint? Measure that. So you keep checking the measurements all the time. So you're kind of pushing things around, correcting as you go. So now we've got the shoulder and the back. So you get the angle right. Use the pencil to help you get the angle. The shoulder and the back. You can barely see the lines. They're very, very faint. As you're confident that the lines are in the right place, then you can sort of firm them up a bit. So I've got the head, the neck, the shoulder, the back, and sort of the right arm. Now I'm working down the picture, and I want to try and get the other arm in. So I've got to work out where it should go. So that we start with a knee. The knee will give us the elbow position. So I've marked in the knee, and now I'm working out where the elbow should go. So we've got the arm, the knee, then the elbow. Okay, you can use what we call negative space to help you get a shape. So if you can't draw the actual thing, then draw the space between the things. So what I'm doing here is drawing in the negative space, what's called negative space, which is a space inside the shape. And if you get the space inside a shape right, then you get the shape right. So the concept of negative space is really important. So we're now just kind of making sure we've got the neck, the chin, the left arm, the knee in the right place. Always checking the verticals, that everything's in line vertically, that should be in line vertically. So we're now firming up the neck a little bit, putting in that V, the neckline. Now you can see as I'm getting more confident, the lines are getting a little bit darker. Need to move down and put the legs in. Just checking the measurements. Keep checking, and checking again. So I've got the head far too wide, so I need to bring the head in, make the head a bit smaller. Yeah, so that needs to come in there. So I made quite a big correction there. Once you've corrected lines, it's probably a good idea to use the putty rubber to remove the old lines. Otherwise, you can end up with so many lines you don't know what's what. A bit of shading to give the position of the hair, that helps. You can put some features in. We're not doing a portrait here, so you don't have to be particularly exact about this. It's not a life-like face that you need, just to kind of mark in the positions of the eyes, the nose, and the mouth very, very faintly, just so it looks like there's a face there. Okay, I'm now getting more confident about the position of the arm, so I'm going over those lines again. So measuring again, head to the elbow, is that okay? Seems a little bit off there. So is that elbow in the right place? You can check from the bottom of the drawing, measure up to the elbow. And that seems okay. So maybe the head's a bit too high. So I need to bring that hair down a little bit. And because I've made quite an important correction, I'm going to rub out the original lines. And so on you go. Keep measuring, keep checking, keep correcting, but gradually firming up those lines as you get confident that things are in the right place. If you start to kind of draw your lines in too dark without doing all the checking and correcting, you'll find that things have got in the wrong place and it'll be too difficult to correct because you won't be able to rub out your lines. So it's really important to keep working very, very faintly until you're sure your lines are in the right place. And once you've got your figure, you've got all the features drawn, you can then start to really firm up the lines, make them darker, put in more detail. So I don't draw the hand in that much detail, but roughly show where the fingers are, facial features, etc. And you can also use shading for the dark areas. So find the dark areas and shade those in. You can either use the side of the pencil or hatching, a little bit of smudging to fill in those areas. It's quite a good idea. And then use the rubber to lift it off where it should be lighter. So to lift off the areas where it's light and then shade the areas where it's dark. Okay, the putty rubber is excellent because you can shape the rubber and be much more exact about how you rub things out.